Welcome to this explainer. Look, we're going to untangle the incredibly complex web of Microsoft AI licensing today so your organization can actually innovate without completely blowing its IT budget. If you're sitting in an IT, security, or procurement role right now, I know you're probably feeling the heat. The board is constantly asking about AI agents, leadership is yelling, move fast, and procurement is desperately demanding cost optimization. It's literally a perfect storm. So today, we're going to break down exactly how you can navigate this maze with total confidence and, most importantly, without bleeding your budget dry.
Okay, let's just dive straight into the elephant in the room. This really dangerous assumption that simply buying more licenses will magically organize your AI strategy. Spoiler alert, it absolutely won't. What we're seeing in the market right now is a very real danger of organizations buying Agent 365 for completely the wrong reasons, handing out Copilot licenses way too broadly, and totally overlooking the massive power they already have sitting right there in their Microsoft 365 E5 foundation. I mean, we see perfectly sensible AI ambitions, usually sparked by some executive who saw a flashy demo on LinkedIn, right, rapidly turning into a complete licensing mess.
And that brings us to this warning, which is just so clear. Don't let Microsoft licensing turn your agent strategy into chaos. The core issue here is astonishingly simple, but man, is it incredibly common. Too many professionals are treating Microsoft 365 Copilot, Agent 365, and Microsoft 365 E5 as if they were just interchangeable layers of the exact same thing. They are absolutely not. They solve completely different problems, they justify totally different budgets, and if you blur those boundaries, you're either going to wildly undergovern your AI agents or you're going to massively overpay for your software estate. And nobody wants that. So here's our roadmap to clear up all this confusion. We're going to hit the AI licensing trap, define the 3 layers, figure out how to avoid those expensive mistakes, look at a big twist coming in June 2026, and finally build a smarter rollout strategy.
All right, let's jump into part 1, the AI licensing trap. Stop treating these layers as interchangeable.
So the biggest misconception out there right now is that Agent 365 is just kind of like Copilot but more. Honestly, nothing could be further from the truth. These two serve entirely different purposes. Copilot is all about helping people work alongside AI in their daily flow of work. Think of it as an amenity. Agent 365, on the other hand, is about governing, securing, managing, and observing autonomous agents at scale. It is a control room. That's not just some minor cosmetic difference, folks. That's the fundamental difference between AI productivity and AI operational control. If your organization is out there only asking, hey, do we want agents, you're honestly having the wrong commercial conversation entirely.
Moving right along to Section 2. Let's clearly define these 3 layers: the foundation, the amenity, and the control room.
You really need to think of Microsoft's ecosystem in 3 distinct, highly specific layers. Because if you try to smash all 3 of these into a single AI purchase, you are basically setting a phenomenal amount of money on fire. Microsoft 365 E5, that's your rock-solid foundation for security and identity. Microsoft 365 Copilot, that's your premium end-user productivity layer, your amenity, right? And then Agent 365 is your control room for agent governance and observability. You absolutely have to assign Copilot where users actually need AI support, assign Agent 365 where you genuinely need control, and rely on E5 as the foundation for the whole shebang.
Now, what's genuinely fascinating here is looking at what you likely already have. I mean, if you're already paying for E5, you shouldn't just blindly buy another layer because the word agent happens to be in the latest marketing brochure. So many enterprise customers fall right into this trap. They either assume E5 makes Agent 365 totally unnecessary, or even worse, they completely forget E5 exists and they buy Agent 365 way too early. E5 already gives you massive capabilities. You can discover local endpoint agents, apply purview and defender protections, and control your data risk. For a lot of early AI pilot programs, E5 is absolutely enough to get you started safely. Let's shift gears to Section 3, avoiding expensive mistakes, or what I like to call curing lazy licensing.
Instead of constantly asking, do we have E5? This right here is the million-dollar question. Where does E5 stop being enough? That question defines the exact moment your organization moves from just tinkering with AI experimentation to requiring real AI governance as an operating model. Because look, E5 does not replace Agent 365 forever. When you start actually wanting centralized agent governance, policy-driven onboarding, agent identity management, and specific threat detection for those AI agents, well, that's the moment you're no longer just using AI. You're now running an AI agent estate. And when you run an estate, Agent 365 suddenly becomes your mandatory control plane. So here is the absolute crucial point. Agent 365 is licensed per user, but it's tied to a specific scenario. Meaning, your very first job is to identify the human accountability model. You know, the sponsor, the manager, or the process owner. The whole mindset of, we're doing agents, so we need Agent 365 for everyone. Actually, scratch that. That's just flat-out lazy licensing. It completely skips the most vital step of architecture. Agent licenses shouldn't just be handed out like candy. You have to map the license to the operational persona who is actually responsible for the production use of that agent. If you skip this, you're either going to buy way too many licenses just to play it safe, or you're going to build a governance model that completely falls apart during an audit. Which brings us to a major curveball in Section 4. The June 2026 twist, raising the security stakes. Check this out. There is a massive shift coming. Right now, today, Agency 365 is largely treated as this neat standalone add-on, but circle June 1, 2026 on your calendars. By then, Microsoft is making E5 the expected foundational prerequisite for enterprise customers buying new Agent 365 licenses. This is huge. This is Microsoft explicitly signaling to the market that production-grade autonomous agents require a production-grade security and compliance foundation. You simply cannot build a skyscraper on a foundation of sand, right? And because of this big prerequisite change, the whole conversation totally shifts. It goes from a basic technical, hey, can I add this, to a much more serious evaluation of your underlying compliance posture. Honestly, this is a far more useful question for your organization to be asking anyway. It forces IT, security, and procurement to actually sit down at the same table and verify that the core infrastructure, your identity management, your data protection, is fully locked down before you unleash autonomous agents into your environment.
All right, let's bring it all home in Section 5, a smarter rollout strategy. Start narrow, govern hard, and scale deliberately.
Please, whatever you do, never skip straight to procurement and ask, how many licenses should we buy? That is literally a recipe for shadow AI and massive duplicate spending. Instead, you've got to follow a strict sequence. First, classify what the agent is actually going to do. Second, pinpoint the human who owns the risk. Third, separate the folks who just need an AI assistant from the processes that demand strict governance. Fourth, build out your minimum viable control model. And then, and only then, do you actually assign the license.
You really want to limit your initial scope to your critical business process agents. Do not roll out Agent 365 to everyone on day one just because some executive demanded it. Start narrow. Focus heavily on high-risk areas, regulated data, and use cases that are clearly owned in production. You should only scale up your licensing when you hit specific triggers, like when compliance demands structured behavioral controls or when security suddenly needs agent-specific monitoring. You've got to scale deliberately based on actual business needs, not just the hype.
At the end of the day, the organizations that succeed here won't be the ones that buy AI licenses the fastest. Not a chance. The winners will be the ones that can confidently look you in the eye and answer these three vital questions. What are our agents actually allowed to do? Who is accountable for them? And which licenses are truly required to support that model versus which ones are just expensive noise? If you can answer these clearly, congratulations, you've mastered the maze. You're no longer just reacting to vendor pressure, you're proactively architecting a governed, secure, and cost-effective AI operating model. So, I'm going to leave you with this somewhat provocative thought to chew on. Is your licensing strategy right now more chaotic than your agent strategy? Because if you don't master this licensing maze right now, the operational chaos that follows is going to cost you way, way more than the software ever could. Don't let the fact that you have E5 lull you into assuming you're fully covered, but please don't blindly buy Agent 365 and Copilot for everyone either. Take a breath, look at the architecture we laid out today, and make your licensing actually work for you. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Now get out there and govern those agents.